not so hard to do this work if you know you're not doing it alone, right? A big part of what makes it hard for me to do this kind of work is to knowing that most everyone I know doesn't really understand it. And for me to actually take action on these things for myself. I'm out in the hills above Pescadero, California, just outside of Santa Cruz. Out on a trail. It's a beautiful day. And I like to come out and do this podcast in nature, in context if I can, because, I talk about the value, importance, and the passion I have about, feeling connected, feeling in harmony around being a part of this planet, being connected to the very source that allows us to be alive. And I recognize that as I talk about those things, it's important to come through with a certain authenticity, a certain, I'm aware that sometimes my own desires and interests for people that get what I'm getting can get involved in what I'm sharing. So doing it from out in nature really helps me stay just, I'm present in the moment. I'm looking at nature. I'm feeling the sun on my face. I'm hearing a few birds, crunch of the dry grass under my feet. And I'm not conjuring the idea of nature connection in this moment. I'm actually experiencing it and talking about it as I experience it. And my hope is that the authenticity, the integrity of that direct transmission comes through in these podcasts. I'm not always able to do that, but when I can, I do. I want to thank Evan Steele, a friend of mine in the Rising Man community. We had a really good conversation the other day, phone conversation, and a lot of what I'm going to drop into today is still with me from that conversation. And I think, Evan, you should come on the podcast soon. We can do a conversation together and continue that there. But for today, what this basically boils down to today is let me put it this way. There's you, there's me, there's most of the people we know. There's our general sense of reality in the world. People we know, our families that live a pretty good standard of life, right? Now, to one degree or another, yours may be modest, mine may be modest. But in general, if you're living in America, the United States, or any other kind of first world or even second world country, as it's said, your needs are being met pretty well. You're able to, if you're living here anyways, and you got the time and the wherewithal to tune into a podcast like this, it's probably because most of your stuff's covered. You got a vehicle that runs well, you can afford gas, you have a job or some kind of support to pursue the things you want to do with your life. You've got a place to live that has indoor plumbing and heating and air conditioning. Obviously, you've got some kind of, electronic device for communications or more than one. You've got friends that you go out and socialize with, meals, time out, doing things, You've got pursuits and hobbies. Buy the clothes you want for the most part. You're doing it right. We have a pretty good lifestyle. And if you're to just do the math on how many people in the world are living at your standard of lifestyle or thereabouts, it's not really that many. It's small compared to the nearly 8 billion people on our planet right now. And for the rest of those 8 billion people, they are striving to have a better life, a better standard of living. They are hoping to achieve at least the standard of life that we are living. And even us, we tend to think that our standard of living isn't enough. We want more, whatever that looks like. More time to do the things we want to do, more money to have the things we want to have. And then it just keeps going on up the ladder. But I'm drawing attention to this because if you look at our situation with the climate today, and I'm not really that concerned in this conversation about where you fall on reconciling how much humans are involved with changing our climate. I don't think there's any scientists alive right now that will deny the truth of that. But the point of this conversation is that to the effect of resources that our industries use that enable us, you and me, to live the lifestyles that we live, the small number of us that are actually living that lifestyle are using up the resources and not taking care of the planet in a way that will actually allow the rest of the world to get here, if that makes sense. So for instance, if you consider all the different industries, our food industry, our clothing industry, our technology industry, our transportation industry, our housing industry, our power and electricity industries, if we just wanted to double the number of people that can live the way we live, you and I, just to greet one other person from below our standard of living up to our level of standard of living, that means that the entirety of all our industries would need to double 200%. And already, just the water issue alone tells you that is not possible, the way that we are doing life, right? The way that we achieve this standard of living is not sustainable, even for us, let alone those who are pursuing this standard of living for themselves, let alone, everyone on the planet. So why I'm talking about this is because this is something I've been working with on myself, really trying to get in touch with where my idea for my standard of living came from. All the messaging and beliefs and ideas and concepts about the type of life I should be living came from, and how much I've attached my feelings to them, my feelings of fulfillment, my feelings of purpose, my feelings of participation, and what community means, and what friendships mean, and what living a good life means. And I've started to deconstruct them, because what I'm realizing is that the last 2 years I've been living here in Santa Cruz has been a downsizing, a paring down of my lifestyle, right? So I'm living in a yurt now. I don't have I have electricity, but I don't have indoor plumbing. I have a composting toilet. My shower is outside. I heat the yurt with wood. And I don't commute for work, so I'm not in my vehicle burning a lot of gas. It's a smaller town, so in general, my running errands and socializing is in a smaller area. And my income has shrunk a lot in the last 2 years. So it's made me have to reconsider what potential I'm actually capable of, just by the fact that I am not generating an income that would create the lifestyle I once envisioned for myself. And that's been really good work for me to do. What it's given me is a lot more time to be outdoors. I already spent a lot of time outdoors prior to that, but because I don't work regularly, I don't have a lot of money to go and just be busy doing stuff that costs money. I've just had a lot more opportunities and options to just go outside, hike around, get down to the beach, get on these trails. And what I'm realizing is how much connection and peace and well-being and fulfillment I experience when I'm just out in nature. And I hike a lot by myself almost all the time. But I go out in nature with an intention of an awareness of trying to connect with all the sentience out here, right? So I get off the trail a lot. I'm really listening to the birds. I'm really looking around for signs of life and activity, and really trying to use my awareness, my consciousness, and all that I have as a human to reflect back to the earth, just this desire to connect and be a part of. And whenever I come back in off the land, I feel great. I'm not needing anything except for maybe somebody to share my story with, right? And then what happens is coming back to the car, getting into the car, going into intellectual mode where I've got to be cognizant of like how to drive a car, rules of the road, moving at a speed that a human is not naturally possible, for them to move at. Coming into the city zone where there's traffic lights and lots of interpretation, lots of signs, language, sounds, unnatural sounds, buildings, unnatural structures. And that's where all of us spend the majority of our day, is interacting in our modern world. And how most of us are spending, we're looking for that sense of calm, peace, belonging, connection, fulfillment, and purpose in that modern world that we've created. We spend all our time in it trying to create that feeling within that world by all this doing, all this resource using. When the truth of the matter is, even if you're uncomfortable with the outdoors, and I've seen it because I've worked with a lot of people outdoors, kids, adults. I've been outdoors with people who have hardly ever been outdoors and they don't even want to sit on the ground. But eventually getting them out there enough, everybody comes back to comfort in nature. Everybody comes back to finding peace and fulfillment and calm in nature. It's just the truth. And it may take you a week, it may take you a year. And what I find phenomenal for myself and for these people that I've worked with is that if we're going to continue to, get through this time of great change, climactic change, cultural change, economic change, all the change that needs to happen, we're going to have to find a way to turn more towards looking at Earth as something we relate to, as a relationship, as part of the figuring. I said this before. I think, the quote is attributed to Einstein. I don't know if it really was him, because you know how the internet is, but the axiom is pretty true. You can't use the same thinking that created a problem to create the solution. And what feels really true about that is, it's great that countries and governments and people are beginning to wake up that we need to live life differently. And it's wonderful that our Congress was able to pass this near $300 billion, green environmental package to help start to remedy some of the systems that have created the problem. But that's all an attempt to maintain our standard of living and find some way to, it's like trying to patch the leaky boat once we're already out at sea and hope that it holds, as opposed to realizing that maybe we shouldn't be out at sea. And what I want to do in this conversation too is just try to link each other to this challenge that I've been doing for myself, which is really sitting with myself, being out here like I am right now in nature, or in meditations, or reading certain books, or getting into certain conversations, and really, honestly, a lot of it's just observing. My powers of observance are so high after I come in off a good hike. I get back into town, and it's the contrast is so obvious. And to just recognize that I have a choice to make. Because the goal of me as a human, my goal is to experience fulfillment, experience connection, experience peace, experience safety and security, and to recognize opportunities that are within my capacity and capability to pursue in order to sustain my life. Now, that's kind of an obtuse way to say that the way that I'm living today and the way that most of us live today in first world countries is not the only way we can live and have that same experience that we have of living a good life. Does that make sense? We have a lot of imprinting. We have a lot of associations. If you think about going on vacation, if I say the word vacation to you, that immediately is going to create imagery in your mind in a way of, and a certain experience that you would anticipate, right? For most people, it means going somewhere tropical, or actually getting out into nature a lot of the times. Sometimes it's like a city somewhere in the world. But the sense of, focusing more on the experience of a vacation. What is the experience of a vacation? How does it look and feel? And to know that the look and the feel is something that is, if I want to make you laugh, if I say, let's have a good laugh, right? That's going to create an image in your mind too, a sense of what it is to laugh, right? Now, if you're usually associating laughs with irony, you're going to be expecting some kind of ironic, story that illustrates an irony, and that would make you laugh. But that's not the only way to laugh. I could tell you a joke. I could give you a pun, and that can make you laugh too. And that might be a new way to make you laugh that you haven't encountered before. But if you still get the laugh, then, you still get the experience. I don't know if that's quite as clear, but I think you can kind of get what I'm saying. In that sense is like, if we look at all the ways that the visions and imagery we have and the feelings we attach to the visions and imagery in our life of what we expect our life to be based on these conditions of fulfillment of what it means to be living a good life, if we can look at those and learn how to detach the imagery and explore what other imagery we can put there instead and reattach our feelings to them. Well, I don't even say if we could. I'm saying that we need to. We need to. And I'm saying that mostly because, by all projections that I've come across, most sciences are saying that by 2050, which is less than 30 years away, in your lifetime, in our lifetime, there's going to be close to 10 billion people on the planet. 10 billion people. All of them trying to get to a certain standard of lifestyle based on the messaging and imaging that has been given to them about what a good lifestyle is. And it's mostly coming from first world countries, and it's mostly coming from people like you and me. So if we can't even if our resources and industries and ways and systems that we provide this lifestyle for the handful of us that have it now aren't able to even be doubled, imagine what's going to be asked of those systems when we have 10 billion people. So, one, we need to change the message. We need to change the vision. And two, that's something we need to do for ourselves. And I totally get it. Right now, you might be shaking your head. You might be cursing. You might be about ready to just quit out on this podcast. But I hope you don't. I hope you just recognize, just acknowledge whatever feeling you're having and just stay tuned in here. Because I'm not saying we have to go back to the Stone Age, although I kind of like the idea. And I don't know what our ancient ancestors imagined for themselves what a better life would be when they started to get onto the technological path of making things faster, more convenient, and always upping our experience of safety and security, right? But as I like to say, you can't tell someone who's high on heroin that heroin is bad for them. They're not going to get it in that state. So in the same way, I feel like so many of us, myself included, I rally against this all the time in my own head. I know that the lifestyle I am living is not a good lifestyle for the health of this planet, for the health of I don't have kids, for the health of my nieces and nephews, right? The youngest, who is 3 right now. So that by the time they hit my age, there'll be 10 billion people on this planet. And I want that little one to have a different image a different picture associated with what it means to be living a fulfilled, purposeful life that's connected and full of abundance. It can't look like the life that I'm trying to live, or the life that you're trying to live, or the life that people in lifestyle standards above ours are living. I mean, if you're not tracking the headlines, between all the wildfires, the West literally drying up, water shortages, massive hurricanes, famines, floods, out of season tornadoes, heat waves. Yeah, we're having an impact. We're having an impact. What I'm excited about is nature connection is in everyone's awareness now, for better, for worse. I would prefer that people would have got it in a more natural, gentle way, although it would have taken a long, long time to get people outside in that way. But everyone now is very acutely aware of our relationship to the planet, and we see the top levels, the United States, the most, quote unquote, powerful country in the world, actually devoting a huge amount of budget and legacy to find ways to become more responsive to right living on this planet. And other countries are following suit. Other countries have been doing that. And yes, there are huge entities, multinational corporations and industries they're like the Titanic. We're on the ship. We got on the ship unknowing it was headed for an iceberg, right? And so, yeah, we can tidy up our room and clean up after ourselves in our little ship cabin. But meanwhile, the ship's still going to hit the iceberg because it's just not going to turn in time. But I still urge you to tidy up your room. Put on your life jacket, whatever. This isn't meant to be a doom and gloom podcast, but I say that more to the effect of, if more of us are prepared to make the changes necessary, maybe it's more than the better allegory is, maybe we all need to get to one side of the ship to help it steer to the left quicker, right? If we all agree that we're going to hit an iceberg and we all get to the one side of the boat to lean it a little bit into the turn, maybe we can avoid it. But that requires action. That requires choices to be made. It requires you, crossing from one side of the ship, aka your current lifestyle, to the other side of the ship, aka a different lifestyle that's more in line with the entire, civilization as we know it. Trying to soften the blow of the calamity that's very obviously heading our way. And so what's it going to take? My challenge to you is to really take some time. And I urge you to go out in nature. If you haven't been spending time out in nature, I can't tell you how important it is to do it, more now than ever. It's one thing to think about this question while you're sitting in traffic, or even in a park around the city block, or in the comfort of your home on the couch. You might come to some realizations. But actually taking yourself out somewhere, taking yourself out into a trailhead somewhere out on the land, away from everything, where you're not really seeing traffic or hearing cars or airplanes or seeing buildings, somewhere where you're truly just ensconced in nature, and then having this conversation with you, I think you'll get more clarity. There'll be a richer, more, potent opportunity to learn and to lean into how are you going to reconcile this? How am I going to reconcile this? How am I going to reconcile that I've got a brain that is completely hooked on a concept about what humans are supposed to be doing, and unhook it and formulate another concept almost out of scratch and then hook into that one? That's big work. That is huge work. but I feel it in my bones. That's really what the request is. This isn't about doom and gloom. They say the prophets, there's a great book by Greg Braden. He's a physicist and he writes a lot of cool books. One was called The Isaiah Effect. And in that book, he talks about prayer and what's really happening in the brain when we pray. Like, what is the brain doing? And it's a pretty fascinating read. But one of the parts he talks about that in the Bible, for instance, whenever there's a prophets who are prophesying, the way we tend to think about prophets is they know the future and they're telling you the future's coming and that it's an unavoidable thing. So hopefully you can make some moves and avoid being sucked up in that, event. But he said what they're really saying is what prophets really were able to do is to look at the behaviors and activities that we're doing now and look all the way through to what the outcome would be down the road. So it wasn't so much about that. It was, prophets weren't so much talking about what was definitely going to happen and to run for the hills as much as they were saying, if we don't change what we're doing now, there's an unavoidable outcome that will come from it. And I like that a lot because, again, I'm just me. And I can make some changes. I can make more changes. And they're subtle, they're small. I mean, I when I recycle, I drive a relatively economical gas car after giving up my old pickup truck that had horrible gas mileage. Actually, it was taken away from me. I totaled it. And I really wanted to get another one because I loved that truck and it was a huge part of my identity and it represented freedom and all this other stuff. And it was painful to let go of that concept of what having an old four-wheel drive truck meant to me. But I did it. And not by myself. A lot of things came into the mix. Economically, I didn't really have the money to get into another old truck like that because they require a lot of money to fix up, and I didn't really have that money and to have another vehicle available when that thing was getting fixed up. That was the big one, right? And that was just, to me, that was just like the universe kind of waiting for an opportune time to get me on track because I wasn't going to get rid of that truck. I was determined I was going to drive that truck until the wheels fell off. And it took me a good 3 or 4 months to really let go, where I stopped looking for the ideal fix-it-up truck in the want ads and settled into all right, get something more fuel efficient. And now I'm driving around, it's still not the ideal, what I consider what I should be driving. But it's a major leap away from a 15 mile per gallon old pickup truck. And it's used. It's not new, right? Because there was definitely maybe I should get a used car. My dad worked for GM. He retired there. I get a small discount, not, a decent discount on new vehicles. And I could have got into something new if I really, really wanted to. But then I was thinking what's the difference between, an old pickup truck that gets terrible mileage and it's putting a lot of carbon into the air and, the embedded cost of producing a new vehicle, all the industries and the emissions involved in the industries that create a brand new vehicle. It was really the, two ends of the same circle. And so now I'm driving something that it's fine. It's nice. It's great. It's a Mazda, all-wheel drive Mazda compact SUV. Gets 30 miles to the gallon. It's comfortable. It will take me down 80% of the roads that I would have taken my truck down when I go out gallivanting. There's a few roads that I definitely can never go down in that thing that I would have no problem going down in my old truck. But those roads, those you had to go looking for those roads a lot of the time. And it wasn't something I spent a lot of time doing. So all things considered, a long story to say that it was painful and scary to disidentify from what driving an old pickup truck meant. People loved that truck too. I felt good because, it had trail doors on it and had a lift in it and I articulated the suspension. It was very capable, cool looking truck, an old Toyota. And people would comment it all the time. That made me feel good. And no one comments on my Mazda. Nobody. And that was, and that really is kind of what's gotten me on this, opened the door onto this thread of like, okay, what other areas in my life have I identified to a concept or a message that does not work in the world of the future? And if I want to be a good citizen of the planet, I need to start doing that homework more. Another target, Amazon, or any other company that's shipping packages. And I use Amazon. I'm sure we all do. And I'm not saying that buying things online is bad and should go away. But there's definitely a better way that can be done, right? And do I need all the things that I buy online? Probably not. Probably not. There's books I buy online. It's like, oh, could I have gone to the library and just check that book out? Yeah, probably could have. Would have been way less of an emissions issue if I had drove the 8 miles to the library and gotten the book rather than all the industry involved and the people involved and the buildings involved and the vehicles involved to get that one book from some warehouse in the Midwest out to me in California. So little things like that, thinking in different ways, and looking for the low-hanging fruits. I'm not going to get into all the ways we can do it because it's different for everybody. We're all kind of embedded in our visions of what we want our life to look like. And if you're anything like me too, the climate change issues really haven't touched me yet, other than the gas pump maybe, and maybe the supermarket a little bit. But climate change hasn't forced me to change my lifestyle, right? Other factors have. And so there's a little bit of a disassociation I have too, where for anyone out there who's feeling that the truth of that too, doing this kind of work to realign your lifestyle to a world that is more sustainable. If it's not happening, if you're not really feeling it anywhere, that's really just that's just sheer choice. That's just a sheer choice of consciousness and a willingness to make uncomfortable change on behalf of the rest of the world. So I just want to acknowledge that. And if you don't have kids like me, it's another thing where it's hard to really find the emotional connection as to what's going to motivate me to make those changes, to do that work, to do that scrutinizing of my lifestyle, and to challenge myself to drop concepts and associations to imageries and pictures of what it means to have a good life for new ones. If I don't have some kind of tangible, reason to. Kids are a good one, right? Look at the challenges that just the next generation alive right now is faced with. By the time the elementary kids get into college or out of college, and they're, it's about 20 years from now, it's hard to say. It's really hard to say what they're going to be encountering and the changes they're going to have to make. Right? If we're still pursuing a picture of a lifestyle that we grew up with today, right now, they're looking at that, and maybe they're getting a little bit of an understanding that lifestyle isn't going to work, but they're kids. They really can't make they don't have the emotional, intellectual dexterity to understand that they need to be thinking differently right now. So finding a way to make those changes now, just that becomes a visual example for kids coming up today to see that it's what they need to start doing too, right? That's just the whole way life works. Like, we mentor the youth, we elder the next generation, and they will take on the values that they are taught. And that's all of our responsibility. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, if you've got social media presence out there, then you're putting something into the world. You're putting a message into the world, whether you realize it or not. And who knows who sees your stuff and who hears your stuff. And when you think about the ways that our world needs to change in order to create, a world that is hospitable to the next generations, what are you going to say? What are you going to put out there? When I grew up, when I was little, climate change wasn't a thing, right? I have distinct feelings and memories of just being little, and we lived out in the country, rurally. And summers, it's just like you ran outside, it was hot, you went swimming, just never ever thought about, ever. It just didn't even hear about it anywhere. No one talked about it. Like the planet was awesome. The planet was great. The seasons worked, the systems worked. It just was not a thing. Kids today, in 2020, New Jersey became the first state to basically, they now include climate change curriculum in their public schools throughout the entire state of New Jersey, K through 12. So 5-year-olds are coming in and finding out that they're living on a dying planet. Right? Imagine the emotional stress. I can't even imagine, not only just like how that would be just so disorienting to such a young mind like that, but then to think about like how does that even affect the trajectory of their life going forward, growing up in that mindset. Like I didn't really get into that mindset until, probably my late 20s, where I started to really kind of think about like, oh, the environment and, these things are important and choices make a difference. And I had all this, I had the benefit of being an adult and life experience behind me and capacity to sort of, pay attention to how to take care of myself when I was getting worked up about big things. A 5-year-old, no idea. I can't imagine. We have the benefit, if you're somewhere around my age, you had the benefit of like living a good chunk of your life, feeling what it's like to feel safe and secure living on a planet. Right? We have that. These next generations, they're going to come into the world and not have that. They're not going to get that grounding, that emotional foundation that they can fall back on when crazy stuff like the hurricane that just hit Florida happened, or when they tell us that, I don't know if you caught this over the summer, but as the was it Lake Mead, that big reservoir in the west that's been drying up, serves 5 states. These five water boards for these 5 states were told by the federal government to like have a summit and figure out how they were going to make new laws to govern this issue with that water not being available. The water can't meet the quotas that those 5 states have from that water source. And they were sitting on it. And then finally the federal government said like, hey, if you don't figure it out by this date, the federal government's going to come in and tell you how it's going to be. Right? So big changes. And I think they were sitting on that, those water boards were sitting on that because it's just so mind-blowing. It's traumatizing. Like there's no precedent. We don't have any precedent for that in our modern world about entire states not having, millions of people being threatened with not having enough water. It happened with the floods in Mississippi, somewhere in Mississippi this summer, where that huge storm came through and it flooded all their sewer systems, and they didn't have water. The whole city didn't have water for almost a week, fresh water. Meanwhile, there's like, a meter of water out in the streets and in, the basements of their homes. I mean, there's irony for you right there. So I think the main thing I want to convey here is that each of us have a choice. If you're listening to this podcast, you've got a lot of choice in your life. You have empowerment. You have facility, you have support. So you know you have choice. And if you're out there in the world pursuing a certain life for yourself that looks a certain way, I'm really asking you, are you willing to really take a close look at it and to acknowledge that so much of what you want to create for yourself is going to cost resources and industries that we as a species across the planet can't really support going into the future in the way that we do them now. And to know that, they're not going to happen anytime soon. I don't think, like if you're hoping to have a really nice house and a big fat piece of property, and travel the world and have your own clothing line, sure, that still might be possible in a sustainable way, but I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime. Hate to say it. So again, looking at that image and those feelings that we attach to that image of what it means to be living a good life, and be willing to do the hard work, the scary work, to sit down and really do inventory and pull it apart and unhook those feelings from that image. Unhook from all the things we believe we have to do to achieve the manifestation of that thing that then gives us that feeling. If you go camping at all, the whole point of camping is to, get in touch with a simple life, right? Minimalist. I mean, some people go out there all whole hog. But in general, if you go camping, you're kind of roughing it. You're just taking the minimal things you need. Simple food, simple materials. You're out in nature, and it feels great. It feels great. You get that feeling of fulfillment and peace and calm and connection. And then we come back and we step right back into our sophisticated, complex life, and that feeling goes away. What does that tell you? Listen, I sat behind a computer for 24 years doing special effects work for TV shows and all kinds of cool stuff, made really good money. And for better or for worse, I didn't hang on to a lot of that money, so it's not around right now. And I don't do that work anymore. And as I was saying, I'm living a very simple life right now in this yurt, wood fire stove. I'm not working a lot, so I don't have a lot of money. And I gotta tell you, there's not much difference in the emotional experience of what the good life feels like between that busy life I was living, driving, commuting every day, sitting behind a computer for hours every day, buying clothes that look cool at the job, doing all these things. That was a lot of fun. Felt great, looked great, great memories. And the way that I feel today about the life I have now feels equally great, looks different, making new memories for the future. But again, think about that 8 billion people. That's really kind of the take home is, I get it. There's going to be some anger thinking about the people who got to live the way they wanted to live and who messed up this system. And then there's those of us who are going to have to make the hard decision to acknowledge that we can't in good faith live those lifestyles in those systems, and be the trailblazers to go through the difficulty and the discomfort of forging new ways, being willing to be disciplined and committed to turn the Titanic, just solely on the behalf of the next generation, right? Is that enough? Is that enough for you? So yeah, it's a beautiful fall. get out and take a walk, take a journal. Ask yourself some of these questions. When you think about living the good life, think about all the things you're putting in, the message you're putting out there. If you're offering programs, looking at the message that you're sending about why your program is good. Whatever career you're doing, looking at the value, actual value of your career beyond the money it brings, right? What industry are you working in? Is it part of the problem on some level? Is it worth all the embedded energy that it takes just for you to have that career? Thinking about the commute, travel involved, the machinery, or whatever it takes for you to actually just do your job. And again, I've heard it said that one book I was reading, it said that I was talking about hypnosis, and the premise was that, we don't go somewhere and get put under hypnosis. Hypnosis really is, there's a nice flicker back there. I think he's letting everybody know I'm coming through. Hey, buddy. So the premise is that hypnosis is just all the time. We're always under some hypnosis, some state of mind, some perceived reality. All of our visions and feelings and emotions all are one state of mind. And that when we go and get put, quote, under hypnosis, what we're really doing is we're literally just changing the channel. It's changing the channel in the TV of our minds. Kind of going back to the idea of what makes you laugh. You might always have just laughed at ironic things, but maybe if, you open, change the channel to laughing at puns, you would get to laugh at puns too. And the experience of laughing, the experience of laughing is the experience of laughing. It doesn't really matter what's making you laugh on a certain level. So being willing to be open to that. And recognizing that, getting out into nature, to stripping down a life, not, to letting go of these attachments to keeping up with the Joneses, or, having the right clothes, or going to the right restaurants, or traveling to the right cities, and just all that other stuff that's just out there in the world, just poking at our egos. Just being willing to put that down. And just to find, to be finding ways to develop that peace and comfort and purposefulness and fulfillment just within inside. It's all inside. And to recognize that the connection, that the easy access we have to that just by getting out in nature. And the more that we can actually connect, right? So not just taking a fast walk down a trail for exercise, but really taking a slow walk. Not for exercise at all, but just to be in the experience of, like I am now, just feeling these bushes kind of grab me as I walk by, and hear the sound of the crunching grass under my feet, and the voice of that flicker back there. And to think that flicker knew that I was there, that flicker knows that I'm here. I've been seen. I've been seen by another creation, another species. And I talked back to it. And when I really pay attention to doing that, oh my gosh, the sense of connection and belonging and peacefulness I feel. And it didn't take anything at all. It didn't take all this other stuff that we're doing out there in our modern worlds, trying to create that scenario with all this resource and energy and time. Just came from being out here. All right. I hope this is making some sense. And I'm such a huge advocate for this work. I'm doing this work myself. It's hard. Ooh, it's really thick through here. What's the metaphor? But I want to share the journey with people. It's not so hard to do this work if you know you're not doing it alone, right? A big part of what makes it hard for me to do this kind of work is to knowing that most everyone I know doesn't really understand it. And for me to actually take action on these things for myself, the byproduct is me being less connected to my community, less connected to my friends, less connected to my family even. Because for better or for worse, it's it's fringe thinking. I get it. And maybe I'm way off in left field. But I don't think so. Because as I said, the way I feel right now of just being out here in this beautiful place and just allowing myself to be affected by just the direct contact with nature, nothing can make me feel better than that. Nothing can make me feel better than that. Sure, I can find it in the modern world, moments of it. But again, the amount of resource, energy, and effort it takes to recreate a scenario in order to get what I get just from coming out here in a context that already exists, it's a lot. It's a lot. You know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We don't have to pursue it. It's already here. It's already here. We're just looking in the wrong, I don't want to say wrong direction. We're not looking at the source of it. Put it that way. All right. So, I'd love to hear comments, or opinions, shares. It's hard to put all this in words because it's, I think a lot about it and then it feels clear in my head. Then I go to say the words and it gets kind of clunky. I've been doing some writing on it too, so maybe I'll figure a way to kind of put it into words better. But if anything's resonating with you about this, I would love to hear from you. And yeah, the challenge is, are you willing to sit down and take a look at this for yourself? And I'm curious to hear what you'll see. Thanks for tuning in.